Hey, everyone. Tonight, we're drifting back to a place where nothing much happens, and when it does, it's usually handled very poorly and at great expense. So get comfortable, lower the lights, maybe adjust the volume so my voice feels less like a person talking and more like a distant thought you're not required to answer. We're going to spend some quiet time together walking through the slow, uneventful routine of a castle guard. Not a hero, not a knight in shining armor, just a guard, standing, waiting, existing quietly while history unfolds somewhere else. Imagine the stone is cold. It always is. Castles have a talent for being cold even in summer, as if they resent warmth on principle. The guard wakes before dawn, because of course he does. Dawn is important people who like routines and bells. There's a bell. There's always a bell. It rings without apology, and our guard sits up slowly, already tired, already questioning his life choices. Though he wouldn't phrase it that way. He would just sigh. Quietly. Sighing is a recurring theme. He dresses in layers that were outdated when his father was young. Wool mostly. Scratchy. Heavy wool that smells faintly of damp stone and other guards. The uniform is practical, which is a polite way of saying it's deeply unflattering. If this guard has ever been called the fair or the brave, it was probably ironic. More likely he's called something like, "Hey, you," or "Why are you sitting?" Breakfast is bread. It is always bread. Sometimes it's bread with something on it, which feels luxurious. Sometimes it's just bread reminding you that bread exists. He eats slowly, because there's no reason not to. The day stretches ahead like a very long corridor with nothing at the end, except more standing. By the time he reaches his post, the castle is waking up in its own slow, echoing way. Servants move quietly, already exhausted. Somewhere far above, a royal child is screaming about something deeply unreasonable, like socks. Somewhere else, a noble is coughing in a way that suggests they will not see next winter, or possibly tomorrow. The guard hears all of it, and responds by doing nothing. This is his skill. Doing nothing is an art form here. He stands by a gate. Gates are important. They make people feel safe, even when they are wildly ineffective. This gate has seen better centuries. It creaks slightly like it wants attention. The guard does not give it any. He stares forward, not aggressively, just present. Hours pass. This is the part people don't talk about. The standing, the waiting, the thinking about nothing, and then thinking about something deeply pointless, like whether pigeons have favorite towers. The guard shifts his weight. This is the most exciting thing that happened for a while. Occasionally, someone important walks by. The guard straightens slightly. Not too much. Overdoing it looks suspicious. The important person does not notice him. This is ideal. Being noticed often leads to questions, and questions lead to trouble, and trouble leads to paperwork, which in medieval times usually meant shouting. The guard's job is to watch for threats. This sounds dramatic, but threats are rare and usually disappointing. A suspicious goat once wandered too close to the gate. It was watched very carefully. The goat did nothing. It was escorted away with dignity. Most days, the greatest danger is boredom, the kind that settles in your bones, the kind that makes you consider counting stones in the wall. He starts, stops, starts again, loses count, accepts defeat. Inside the castle, life is supposedly grand. Gold, tapestries, dynasties clinging desperately to relevance. The guard sees none of this. He sees boots, cloaks, the hems of dresses dragging through mud that no one will ever acknowledge. He hears gossip filtered down through servants who are bored enough to share it. The king is ill again. Naturally, he is always ill. Something about humors. The queen is unhappy. Also naturally. She is always unhappy, usually for very good reasons that no one plans to address. A prince has fallen off a horse. Everyone is relieved it wasn't worse, though secretly disappointed it wasn't more interesting. The guard nods along internally and returns his attention to the gate. Time moves strangely when nothing is happening. The sun rises higher. Shadows shift. A breeze passes through the courtyard and is immediately swallowed by stone. The guard's stomach growls. He ignores it. Hunger is part of the job description. Unofficially, At midday, he is relieved by another guard. This guard looks exactly like him, but slightly more tired. They exchange a few words. Not many. Too many words invite emotion, and emotion leads to reflection, and reflection is dangerous. He eats again. More bread. Possibly soup. The soup is thin enough to be aspirational. He eats slowly, savoring the warmth more than the flavor. Around him, other guards do the same. They do not talk much. There is an unspoken agreement not to acknowledge how monotonous this all is. Afternoon duty is the same as morning duty, but with more aches. He returns to his post. The gate remains unimpressed by his presence. A cart arrives with supplies. He checks it with mild interest. It contains vegetables that look like they've already given up. He waves it through. As the day drifts on, the castle settles into its afternoon lull. Nobles nap. Servants clean the same spots they cleaned yesterday. Somewhere, a lute is being played badly. The guard listens to it echo through the stone halls and wonders, briefly, what it would be like to leave. He does not pursue this thought. Leaving is complicated. This is the rhythm of castle life. Repetition layered over repetition. Generations of guards have stood here, in more or less the same place, watching different banners flutter overhead. Dynasties change. The stone does not care. The guard has heard stories, of course, of sieges and battles and moments when guards mattered. These stories are told in hushed tones, late at night, when the wind makes everything sound more important. But most guards will never see such days. They will stand. They will wait. They will age quietly, becoming part of the background. As evening approaches, the light softens. This is the guard's favorite time, though he would never admit it. The castle looks almost kind in this light, less imposing, more tired, like everyone else. Torches are lit. Shadows stretch. The guard's shift ends eventually. He hands off his post again. Another nod. Another quiet exchange of understanding. He walks back to his quarters slowly, boots echoing in a way that feels louder than necessary. Dinner is familiar. Bread. Something warm. He eats. Listens to murmurs. Ignores a minor argument about whose turn it is to fetch water. Afterward, he lies down. The stone beneath him is cold, but he's used to it. Sleep comes slowly, like everything else here. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after that, and the day after that, until history decides to interrupt, usually rudely. And that's where we'll pause for now, standing quietly by the gate, listening to the castle breathe. If you're still awake, tell me in the comments, what do you think will be the hardest part of this kind of life? Or would the calm repetition suit you just fine? If you're still here, welcome back. The torchlight is lower now, the castle quieter, and the stones have cooled even further, as if they've been holding on to the day's complaints and are finally letting them out. Our guard is asleep, or at least pretending to be, which in a shared sleeping space is often the safer option. Sleep in castles is rarely deep. It's more of a prolonged pause, interrupted by coughing, snoring, and the distant sound of something falling over that no one will investigate until morning. Eventually, morning arrives anyway. It always does. Another bell rings, and once again it feels personal. The guard wakes slowly, his body stiff, his mind already resigned. He swings his legs off the narrow bed and sits there for a moment, gathering himself, which is a polite way of saying staring at the floor and blinking. He pulls on the same clothes. They have not improved overnight. There is a sense of continuity here that borders on emotional commitment. Breakfast appears, unchanged. Bread again, possibly the same bread. Time is a flat circle in the castle kitchen. Today, his post is on the inner wall, overlooking a courtyard that pretends to be cheerful. There's a fountain in the center. It barely works. The water trickles out like it's embarrassed to be there. Pigeons have claimed it entirely. They stare back at the guard with a confidence he does not possess. From this vantage point, he can observe more of castle life, though observe is generous. Mostly he sees people crossing from one obligation to another, all convinced their task is the most important thing happening anywhere. The guard knows better. He has seen days when nothing at all happens, and somehow everyone survives. A young noble walks by, trailing too much fabric and not enough purpose. He looks annoyed, which suggests he's been told no for possibly the first time in his life. The guard remains still. Nobles like reactions. Not getting one unsettles them. Somewhere inside, a council meeting is taking place. The guard does not know the details, but he knows the pattern. Men arguing over maps, pointing at places they've never been, making decisions that will affect people who will never meet them. Eventually, they will decide something unnecessary, congratulate themselves, and break for wine. The guard's responsibility during all this is to exist in the correct place. He does this very well. As the morning stretches on, he notices the small things. A servant pauses to rub her wrist before continuing. A messenger arrives breathless, only to be told to wait. Waiting is a castle specialty. The messenger waits so long that whatever news he carried loses urgency through sheer exposure. This castle, like many others, is home to a family that has been carefully intermarrying for generations. The guard knows this not because anyone has explained genetics to him, but because the evidence walks past him daily. Weak chins, pale complexions, a general look of people who were never meant to leave indoors. The royal children are particularly noticeable. They move through the courtyard accompanied by nurses and tutors, wrapped in layers despite the mild weather. One coughs continuously. Another stares into space with alarming dedication. They are precious, fragile investments, and everyone is quietly anxious about whether they'll make it to adulthood. The guard watches them pass and thinks briefly that standing outside in the cold all day might actually be healthier. By midday, the sun is overhead, though you wouldn't know it from inside the castle walls. Light trickles down reluctantly, as if unsure it's welcome. The guard shifts again. His feet ache. He considers the possibility of sitting. He dismisses it. Sitting leads to questions. A senior guard passes by. Older, slower. A man who has stood in more places than he can remember. They exchange a look that says everything and nothing. The older guard nods once, as if confirm that yes, this is still happening. Lunch arrives. More bread. A piece of cheese that has ambitions beyond its current state. The guard eats and watches the courtyard while chewing slowly, because chewing quickly does not improve the experience. After lunch, the castle sinks into its afternoon haze. This is when the air feels thick, when even the echoes sound tired. Somewhere, a minor noble is practicing archery badly. An arrow hits a wall with a dull thud. No one reacts. The guard's thoughts wander, as they often do, to stories he's heard. Not heroic ones, but the quieter tales pass along between guards. The king who couldn't make decisions without consulting an astrologer. The queen who refused to bathe and insisted it was fashionable. The prince who bit people. There's always a prince who bites people. These stories aren't told with excitement. They're told with the weary tone of people who have seen too much and expect nothing. As shadows lengthen, the guard notices movement at the gate. A small delegation arrives. Not an army. Nothing dramatic. Just a few well-dressed individuals with the stiff posture of people who believe they are important. They are inspected, questioned, and eventually let in because they always are. Once inside, they disappear into the castle's endless corridors, swallowed whole. The guard returns his attention to the courtyard. The pigeons have reorganized themselves. He suspects they are plotting something. Evening approaches again. Another day successfully endured. The guard shift ends, and he walks a familiar path back to his quarters. The castle hums softly now, settling into night. Torches flicker. The air smells of smoke and stone. Dinner is waiting. It has not changed. The guard eats, listens, and participates in a brief, low-energy conversation about whose boots are falling apart fastest. This is as close as they come to competition. Afterward, he stretches out on his bed. His muscles protest mildly. He closes his eyes. Sleep comes in waves, shallow but persistent. Outside, the castle stands as it has for centuries, layered with ambition, decay, and very poor planning. Guard will come and go. Dynasties will rise and fall. The routine remains. And as we drift onward into another quiet night, I'll ask you, if you were standing watch here, night after night, what thoughts do you think would keep returning? Or would you eventually think of nothing at all? Let me know in the comments if you're still awake enough to type. If you're still listening, welcome back. The castle has not moved. The stones are right where we left them. Our guard is waking again, slowly, as if rising from sleep requires negotiation. The bell rings, distant but insistent, and he opens one eye first, then the other, confirming that yes, he is still here, and yes, the day has decided to happen again. Morning in the guard quarters is a muted affair. No one leaps from bed. There is no enthusiasm. Men sit up, stretch carefully, and breathe in a way that suggests they are already tired of standing. Someone coughs. Someone else groans softly, as if even sound requires effort this early. The air smells faintly of old straw, wool, and the kind of resignation that settles into places where nothing changes. Clothes are pulled on without discussion. They fit the same way they did yesterday, which is to say, poorly. Boots are laced. Belts are tightened. There is a quiet understanding that complaining would achieve nothing. Complaining, after all, is for people who believe improvement is possible. Breakfast arrives, predictably. Bread. The guard accepts it without comment. He chews slowly, gazing at nothing in particular. He has long since stopped expecting variety. Variety would feel suspicious. Today, his post takes him near the Great Hall, a space designed to impress visitors and intimidate everyone else. It succeeds at neither, but no one is brave enough to say that aloud. The hall is vast, drafty, and perpetually echoing. Even whispers travel here, bouncing off stone like they're trying to escape. The guard stands near one of the tall doors, watching his servant prepare for whatever the court has decided is important today. Tapestries are adjusted. Chairs are aligned. Someone polishes something that was polished yesterday. The hall is being ready for a gathering, which means people will talk for hours and leave feeling vaguely dissatisfied. As the morning wears on, nobles begin to arrive. They sweep in with practiced boredom, cloaks trailing, expressions carefully neutral. These are people born into power, which means they spend their entire lives slightly confused by it. The guard notices the familiar signs. The stiffness, the pale skin, the way some of them move as if their joints were assembled incorrectly. This family, like many royal families, has been marrying itself for generations. Cousins marrying cousins, uncles marrying nieces, all in the name of preserving bloodlines that were already fragile to begin with. The result stands before the guard now, shifting impatiently, adjusting rings on fingers that tremble slightly. One noble clears his throat repeatedly, loudly, as if hoping someone will applaud. No one does. Inside the hall, the ruler of this castle will soon appear. The guard has seen him many times. A man weighed down by robes, expectations, and the quiet knowledge that he is not particularly good at this. He inherited the crown, which is a polite way of saying it was placed on his head before he could object. When the ruler enters, there is a subtle change in the air. People straighten. Conversations hush. The guard remains still. He is not required to react emotionally to power. He has found that this is one of the few advantages of his position. The ruler takes a seat. He looks tired. He always looks tired. Ruling, it turns out, is exhausting, especially when you are constantly worried about plots, illnesses, and whether your heir will survive the winter. The guard watches as the ruler rubs his temple briefly, then composes himself. The meeting begins. Voices rise and fall. Words like alliance and tribute float past the guard, stripped of meaning by distance and repetition. He has heard these discussions before, though never the outcomes. Outcomes rarely affect the guard directly, unless they involve standing somewhere else. As the hours pass, the hall grows warm with bodies and frustration. The guard's feet ache. He shifts his weight carefully, hoping no one notices. His gaze drifts to the tapestries lining the walls. They depict heroic scenes, battles, hunts, moment of triumph. The guard has always found them faintly amusing. They show none of the waiting. Eventually, the meeting breaks. Nobles file out, expressions carefully arranged. Some look pleased. Others look offended. Most look hungry. The ruler lingers, speaking quietly with a trusted advisor who looks deeply stressed. The guard notices a young prince trailing behind, barely paying attention. The boy looks frail, pale, wrapped in too many layers. He coughs into his sleeve and is gently scolded by a nurse. This child is the future, apparently. The guard watches him shuffle away and wonders, not unkindly, how long that future might last. By midday, the hall is empty again. The guard's relief arrives, and he is allowed to move, which feels like a luxury. He walks slowly toward the courtyard, joints protesting. Lunch waits. Bread, of course. Perhaps a thin stew, if the kitchen is feeling ambitious. He eats with the others, listening to fragments of conversation. Someone mentions a rumor of unrest in a nearby region. Someone else dismisses it. Rumors come and go. The castle remains. After lunch, the guard is assigned to patrol along the outer wall. This is a change of scenery, though not a dramatic one. The wall offers a view of fields stretching out toward the horizon. Peasants work steadily, bent over the land. Their lives are harder in many ways, but at least they move. The guard walks his route slowly, scanning the distance for threats that never appear. Occasionally, he spots a traveler on the road, a tiny figure moving with purpose. He wonders where they're going. He wonders if they're happier. He does not dwell on it. The afternoon drifts on. Clouds gather, then disperse. The sun shifts. Time behaves strangely, stretching and folding in on itself. The guard finds himself thinking about small things. The sound of his boots on stone. The way the wind feels cooler up here. The fact that this wall has outlasted countless guard before him. As evening approaches, a chill settles in. The guard wraps his cloak tighter. Below, the fields glow briefly in the soft light before fading into shadow. Smoke rises from distant homes. Supper is being prepared everywhere, not just in the castle. His shift ends again, as it always does. He returns inside, grateful for the shelter even as he resents it. Dinner passes quietly. Someone tells a story about a guard who once fell asleep on duty and woke up to find a cat sitting on his helmet. This is considered entertaining. Night settles over the castle. Torches flicker. The corridors echo softly. The guard lies down once more, body heavy, mind drifting. History continues around him, slow and indifferent. Dynasties wobble. Bloodlines thin. Decisions are made and unmade. And still, the guard stands, waits, and watches. As we let the night carry us forward, I'll leave you with a gentle question. If you were watching all of this unfold from the sidelines, would you feel invisible or quietly relieved? Tell me what you think in the comments. If sleep hasn't already claimed you. If you're still with me, welcome back. The castle is breathing slowly tonight, the way old buildings do when they've seen too much and decided not to comment on it anymore. Our guard is asleep again, or hovering somewhere just above sleep, where thoughts drift lazily and nothing feels urgent. Morning will come, of course. It always does. It arrives without apology, without checking whether anyone is ready. The bell rings. It sounds slightly duller today, or maybe that's just familiarity setting in. The guard opens his eyes and stares at the ceiling for a moment, letting his body catch up with the idea of being awake. Around him, other guards do the same. No one speaks. There's a shared understanding that words are unnecessary at this hour. He rises, dresses, eats the bread. The routine is now so ingrained that it barely registers as action. His hands know what to do without instruction. His feet find the boots automatically. There's something oddly comforting about that, even if he would never describe it as happiness. Today, he is assigned to a post near the royal apartments. This area is quieter, but the silence here carries a different weight. The corridors are lined with tapestries depicting ancestors who look vaguely disappointed. Their eyes seem to follow you, not accusingly, just observantly, as if they're wondering how it all turned out like this. The guard stands near a doorway that leads to rooms few people ever see. Behind those doors are beds large enough to get lost in, trunks filled with embroidered clothing, and shelves lined with relics no one remembers the purpose of. Somewhere inside, members of the royal family are beginning their own day, attended by servants who know far too much and say very little. A door opens briefly. A servant slips out, carrying linens. She moves quickly, eyes down, careful not to draw attention. The guard remains still. He has learned that the less involved you seem, the less involved you become. From his position, he hears muffled voices, a raised tone. Then another, a quiet argument, probably about something trivial that feels enormous to the people involved. Royal disputes are often like that. They rarely concern survival, but they are treated as if they do. The guard listens without listening. He has heard arguments echo through these halls for years. Arguments about marriages arranged too late or too early, about alliances that feel insulting, about children who are sickly, stubborn, or inconveniently alive. Eventually, the voices fade. A door closes. The corridor returns to its usual hush. Time moves forward in small increments. The guard watches light shift across the stone floor. He notices a crack in the wall he hadn't paid attention to before. He wonders how long it's been there. Longer than him, probably longer than the current ruler. Stone is patient like that. As the morning passes, the guard is joined briefly by another guard, stationed a few paces away. They exchange a glance. Not a conversation, just an acknowledgement. Both are thinking the same thing, though neither would say it aloud. This day will be like the others. Mid-morning brings a small disruption. A physician arrives, hurrying down the corridor with a look of concern carefully balanced with self-importance. He disappears behind one of the doors. The guard knows what this means. Someone is unwell. Someone is always unwell. Royal health is a delicate subject. Too much attention invites panic. Too little invites rumors. The guard stands while decisions are made behind closed doors about whether to worry publicly or privately. After some time, the physician reemerges. His expression is neutral, which is rarely reassuring. He nods to no one in particular and moves on. The guard files this away mentally. Another illness. Another quiet concern layered onto many others already resting on this family's shoulders. By midday, the corridor grows busier. Servants pass with trays. Courtiers whisper to one another. A child runs past briefly before being ushered away. The guard remains still, a fixed point in the movement. Lunch arrives eventually. He eats what he's allowed to, stepping aside briefly to chew in peace. The food is familiar, comforting in its predictability. He listens to distant sounds and lets his mind wander. He thinks about time, though not in a philosophical way, more like a practical observation. He has been here for years now. He remembers a younger version of himself, standing in the same place, slightly less tired, slightly more curious. The castle has aged him gently but persistently. He has watched rulers grow older. He has watched heirs fail to thrive. He has watched banners change color and symbols without changing meaning. Through it all, his job has remained the same. The afternoon drifts in quietly. The guard is reassigned to the stairwell, a narrow space that echoes every footstep. Nobles descend carefully. Servants ascend quickly, and everyone pretends not to notice one another. The guard stands halfway up, a silent witness to the choreography of hierarchy. A noblewoman pauses briefly on the stairs, catching her breath. She looks pale, eyes shadowed. She grips the railing as if it might drift away. The guard looks straight ahead. When she moves on, he allows himself a single glance after her. She is married into this family. He knows. One of many. Her future is secure, which is another way of saying complicated. The day continues like this, a series of small observations stitched together by standing and waiting. The guard's body aches in familiar places. His thoughts drift, return, drift again. As evening approaches, the castle takes on a softer tone. Voices lower, movement slow. The air cools. The guard feels the subtle relief that comes with knowing his shift will end. Soon, he will be allowed to be horizontal. He is relieved at the proper time. He nods. He walks back through corridors that feel like old acquaintances. Dinner is served. Bread again. He eats slowly, savoring the warmth and the quiet. Night settles in fully now. The castle glows softly with torchlight. The guard lies down, hands folded over his chest, eyes half closed. Sleep comes gradually, like a tide easing in. Another day recorded only in memory. And even that will fade as we drift onward together. I'll ask you this. Do you think time will feel heavier or lighter in a place like this, where so much changes and so little does? If you're still awake, tell me in the comments what you think. If you're still listening, welcome back. The castle has made it through another night without collapsing, which everyone takes as a personal success. Our guard wakes once more, not startled, not refreshed, but present. The bell rings, because of course it does, and he exhales slowly before sitting up. This has become a familiar motion, almost comforting. Almost. Morning arrives with the same muted colors as always. Gray stone, dim light, the quiet rustle of men pulling on wool and leather. No one speaks much. Words are saved for later, when they might matter slightly more, which is to say, not much. Breakfast is waiting. Bread again. The guard accepts it without judgment. Judgment requires energy. He eats slowly, let his thoughts drift where they like. Sometimes they drift nowhere at all, which he has learned to appreciate. Thinking too much in a place like this only leads to noticing things you cannot change. Today, his assignment places him near one of the lesser-used gates, the kind reserved for errands and quiet arrivals. This gate does not see grand processions. It sees deliveries, messengers, and people who would prefer not to be noticed. The guard takes his position and settles into stillness. From here, he can hear the distant rhythm of the castle beginning its day. Doors opening. Footsteps echoing. Somewhere, a bell rings again, because apparently one bell is never enough. The guard watches as a cart arrives, piled with sacks of grain. The driver hops down, stretches, and offers a nod. The guard nods back. This exchange is more genuine than most conversations in the castle. As the morning wears on, a pair of courtiers pass through the gate, murmuring to one another. Their voices carry just enough for the guard to catch fragments. Concerns about inheritance, worries about health, speculation about marriages, the usual topics. The guard does not react. He has heard these worries before, spoken by different people with the same anxious tone. The castle's ruling family is under quiet pressure, as they always are. Too many children have failed to thrive. Too many relatives have married too closely. The bloodline is thin, stretched like fabric that has been mended too many times. Everyone pretends not to notice, but the signs are everywhere. A young noble appears briefly at the gate, accompanied by a tutor who looks perpetually exhausted. The child is small for his age, pale, eyes too large for his face. He coughs once, then again. The tutor fusses. The guard watches, expression neutral. This child is important, apparently. The future depends on him, which seems like a lot to place on such narrow shoulders. They pass through the gate and disappear inside. The guard remains. He always remains. Time stretches. The sun rises higher, though the walls block most of it. A breeze passes through, carrying the smell of earth and smoke. The guard shifts his stand slightly, careful to keep it subtle. Movement is allowed, but only just enough to remind your body you're still alive. By midday, the gate has seen very little. A messenger arrives, breathless, holding a sealed letter. He waits while credentials are checked, which takes longer than seems necessary. The messenger fidgets. The guard does not. Eventually, the messenger is allowed inside, his urgency dulled by procedure. Lunch arrives. The guard eats when permitted, stepping aside briefly. The food is predictable. The warmth is appreciated. Around him, other guards eat in silence, eyes unfocused. This is not unhappiness. It is adaptation. After lunch, the guard is reassigned to a watch along a covered walkway overlooking the inner gardens. Calling them gardens is generous. They are more like carefully controlled patches of green, trimmed and maintained to suggest order. The guard stands and looks down at them, watching a pair of nobles stroll slowly, deep in conversation. They gesture occasionally, faces serious. The guard imagines they are discussing matters of state, or perhaps they are arguing about something deeply petty. In this place, it is often difficult to tell the difference. The afternoon drifts on. The guard's thoughts wander to memories, not dramatic ones, small recollections. The first time he stood watch here, the day a previous ruler died quietly in his sleep, the week everyone whispered and waited to see what would happen next. Nothing much did. He has seen banners lowered and raised. He has seen new symbols stitched onto old fabric. Each change felt momentous at the time. Now they blur together. As shadows lengthen, the air cools. The guard wraps his cloak tighter. Below, the garden's empty. Servants move efficiently, clearing paths, closing shutters. The castle prepares for evening the way it always does, methodical and unhurried. Near dusk, a minor disturbance ripples through the walkway. Raised voices. A servant hurrying past. The guard remains at his post. He learns later, through whispers, that a disagreement broke out during supper preparations. Something about seating arrangements. Someone felt slighted. No one was injured. This is considered a good outcome. His shift ends eventually. It always does, even when it feels like it won't. He hands off his post, nodding to the next guard. The exchange is brief, practiced. He walks back through familiar corridors, boots echoing softly. Dinner is served. Bread again, though this time accompanied by something warm and vaguely savory. He eats slowly, listening to low conversation. Someone mentions a physician was called again. Someone else shrugs. Illness is expected here. Night settles over the castle. Torches flicker. The guard lies down, muscles aching in familiar ways. He stares up at the ceiling, letting the day dissolve. Sleep comes gradually, uneven but persistent. Another day has passed. Another quiet contribution to a history that rarely remembers the people who stood and watched. As we drift onward, I'll leave you with this thought. If you spent your life witnessing events that mattered greatly to others but barely touched you, do you think you feel detached or quietly free? If you're still awake, tell me what you think in the comments. If you're still here, welcome back. The night has passed in its usual uneventful way. No alarms, no invasions, no sudden moments of relevance. The castle remains intact, which is really all anyone asks of it anymore. Our guard wakes slowly, as he always does, with a dull awareness that time has moved forward without asking his opinion. The bell rings. It sounds exactly like it did yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. The guard sits up, pauses, and breathes out. There is a brief moment, just a second, where he considers lying back down and pretending the bell was imaginary. He does not do this. He has learned which thoughts are safe, and which ones only make the day longer. Around him, the others rise with the same measured reluctance. No one rushes. Rushing implies urgency, and urgency is rarely justified here. Clothes are pulled on. Boots are laced. Someone mutters something unintelligible, which could be a greeting or a complaint. No one asks. Breakfast arrives in its dependable form. Bread, slightly stale, slightly warm. The guard eats without expectation. He has long since stopped hoping for surprises. Surprises tend to be loud. Today, his assignment is back at the main gate. The familiar one. The gate that creaks. The gate that pretends it is more important than it really is. He takes his place and settles into stillness. Eyes forward, posture steady. From here, he can see the road stretching out beyond the castle walls. It's quiet this morning. A thin mist hangs over the fields, softening everything. For a moment, the world looks gentler than it actually is. The guard allows himself to enjoy that illusion. A farmer passes by in the distance, leading a cart. The guard watches him go, feeling a strange mix of envy and relief. The farmer's life is harder in obvious ways, but at least his work changes. The guard remains where he is, an unchanging detail in a landscape that keeps trying to move on. As the morning progresses, the gate sees its usual traffic, a delivery of supplies, a pair of minor officials arriving late and pretending it was intentional, a messenger who looks far too serious for the importance of the message he's carrying. Each is handled with the same calm efficiency. Check, nod, allow passage, repeat. Inside the castle, something is happening. Something always is. The guard can tell by the way people move faster than usual, by the tension that hums just beneath the surface. Whispers drift toward the gate and dissolve before they become clear. The guard does not strain to listen. If he needs to know, someone will tell him. If no one tells him, it probably doesn't matter. Late in the morning, a carriage arrives. Not a grand one. Something modest by royal standards, which still means unnecessarily ornate. A visiting relative. Perhaps or a potential ally, or both. The guard inspects it carefully, because this is what he is trained to do. Even though most danger arrives from within, the passengers step out slowly. They look tired. Travel does that to people. The guard notes the familiar signs: pale skin, narrow shoulders, the slight stiffness and movement that suggests a shared family tree that loops back on itself too often. They are welcomed inside with polite interest. The gate closes again. The guard returns to watching the road. Mist is burned off now. The day is clear. The sun is higher. Time continues to move at its own unhurried pace. By midday, his feet ache in the usual way. He shifts his weight subtly. The gate creaks. A bird lands briefly on the wall, then takes off again, free to be somewhere else. The guard watches it go without expression. Lunch arrives. Bread again. Something warm if he's lucky. He eats slowly, savoring the pause more than the food. Around him, the other guards do the same. Someone mentions quietly that the ruler's health is not good. Someone else shrugs. This information has been circulating for years. After lunch, the guard is assigned to a short patrol along the wall. He walks a familiar path, boots echoing softly. From up here, the castle looks almost peaceful. The towers rise steadily, unchanged. Flags flutter lazily. It's easy to forget how much tension lives inside those walls. The guard stops at his designated point and looks out over the land. He has done this countless times. Still, he looks. It feels important to look, even when there is nothing new to see. As the afternoon wears on, clouds gather. The light shifts. The air cools slightly. The guard adjusts his cloak. Somewhere below, a bell rings again. Possibly a different bell. Possibly the same one. It hardly matters. Toward evening, a small commotion ripples through the courtyard. Raised voices. Quick footsteps. The guard watches from above as a group of courtiers gathers, then disperses. Later, he hears the reason. A disagreement over succession. Again, the ruler has not named a clear heir. Again, everyone is concerned. Again, the guard absorbs this information with practiced neutrality. Succession crises come and go. Guards remain. His shift ends. He returns inside, descending the stairs slowly. Dinner waits. Bread, as always. He eats, listens, nods occasionally. Someone jokes quietly about how long the walls would last without guards. No one answers. Night falls. The castle settles. The guard lies down, body heavy, thoughts drifting. He thinks about how the days are starting to blur together, how the seasons change almost unnoticed when your routine never does. He wonders if this is what stability feels like, or if it's something else entirely. Sleep comes, slow and imperfect, carrying him into another night that will pass just like the others. And as we drift onward together, I'll ask you this. Do you think repetition makes life smaller, or does it smooth the edges enough to make it bearable? If you're still awake, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you're still here, welcome back. The castle has endured another quiet night, which feels less like an achievement and more like a default setting. Our guard wakes once again, drifting upward from sleep in the slow, careful way of someone who knows there's nowhere in particular to be. The bell rings, steady and unbothered, announcing morning with the confidence of something that has never been ignored. He sits up, feet touching the cold stone floor, and pauses there for a moment. This pause has become a small ritual, not long enough to be called reflection, just long enough to acknowledge that the day exists. Around him, the other guards do the same, each man wrapped in his own version of the same routine. Clothes go on. Boots are tied. The air smells faintly of last night's fire and old straw. No one comments on it. Breakfast appears. Bread, naturally. The guard eats slowly, chewing thoughtfully, not because there's much to think about, but because thinking helps pass the time. Today's assignment places him near the armory, a space filled with weapons that are rarely used and armor that fits fewer people each year. The armory smells of metal and oil, sharp and familiar. The guard stands near the entrance, watching as a pair of squires move in and out, carrying items that look far too heavy for them. Inside, the weapons hang quietly, lined up with care, swords polished but dull by age, spears resting patiently. Shields bearing symbols of families long gone or barely remembered. The guard has always found this room faintly ironic. So much preparation for violence, and so little actual use. A knight passes by, adjusting his gloves. He looks uncomfortable, which is common among knights who spend more time at court than on horseback. The guard gives a subtle nod. The knight nods back, distracted. Whatever he's thinking about, it's probably not the guard. The morning drifts on. Servants move through the corridor, careful around the armory, as if the weapons might overhear them. A messenger hurries past, stops, hurries again. The guard remains still, a constant in a stream of minor urgency. From his post, he can hear distant activity in the training yard, the dull thud of practice weapons, shouts of instruction. Someone grunts in frustration. Training is happening, apparently. Whether it will ever be needed is another matter entirely. The castle's ruling family is awake now, fully engaged in the business of existing publicly. Somewhere above, they are eating a far more elaborate breakfast, though whether it tastes better is debatable. The guard imagines the scene. Long tables, heavy dishes, polite conversation strained by unspoken worries. Those worries have been building quietly for years. The ruler is aging. His hand shakes slightly when he gestures. He tires easily. His children are unpredictable. Some are too frail, some too stubborn. Some have developed personalities that inspire concern rather than confidence. The guard knows all this not because anyone has briefed him, but because castles are very good at leaking information. Whispered conversations travel through walls, carried by servants who have nowhere else to take them. As the morning continues, the armory sees little activity, a few adjustments, a few inspections. Someone complains about rust. Someone else insists it was already there. Nothing is resolved. By midday, the guard is relieved briefly for lunch. Bread again. A thin soup accompanies it, warm enough to be appreciated. He eats slowly, seated this time, which feels indulgent. Around him, the other guards eat with the same unspoken gratitude. Conversation is minimal. Someone mentions the weather. Someone else nods. Someone quietly observes that it feels like the same season it always is here. No one disagrees. After lunch, the guard returns to his post. The armory remains quiet. He stands and watches light shift across the stone floor. Dust motes drift lazily in the air. Time stretches in a way that feels almost physical. In the early afternoon, a small group of nobles arrives at the armory entrance, accompanied by an official who looks stressed. They peer inside, gesture, whisper. The guard listens without listening. Eventually, they leave, looking no more satisfied than when they arrived. Later, the guard learns the reason. There's talk of reinforcing defenses, of possible unrest, of a neighboring region becoming unpredictable. The words sound serious, but they always do. The guard files it away mentally under things that will probably not affect tomorrow. The afternoon drags gently toward evening. The guard's body aches in familiar places. His thoughts wander earlier years, not the beginning of his service, but the middle, the years when he realized this would not change, when the idea of something else stopped feeling urgent and started feeling distant. He remembers guards who stood here before him, men who retired quietly, men who didn't, men who became part of the castle in ways no one documented. Their names are not recorded anywhere, their absence barely noticed. As evening approaches, the armory grows darker. Torches are lit, casting long shadows that make the weapons look more dramatic than they deserve. The guard watches the light flicker across old steel and wonders, briefly, how many of these blades have actually drawn blood. Probably fewer than their owners would like to admit. His shift ends in the usual way. A nod, a quiet handover. He walks back through the corridors, which feel narrower at night. Dinner is waiting. Bread, yes, but also something warm and slightly salty. He eats slowly, listening to low conversation. Someone mentions that the ruler canceled an appearance due to fatigue. Someone else notes that this has been happening more often. The conversation drifts to speculation, then fades. No conclusions are reached. Night settles in. The guard lies down, body heavy, mind drifting. He stares up at the ceiling, tracing cracks he knows by heart. Sleep comes gradually, like a familiar guest who never quite settles in. Another day has passed, quietly absorbed into the long middle stretch of his life. And as we drift onward together, I'll ask you, do you think these middle years where nothing changes are the hardest to endure or the easiest to accept? If you're still awake, let me know what you think in the comments. If you're still listening, welcome back. The castle is quiet tonight, but not silent. It hums with the subtle presence of its inhabitants. Footsteps echoing down distant corridors, the soft creak of doors opening and closing, the faint whisper of the wind through narrow arrow slits. Our guard wakes slowly, reluctantly, aware that another day is beginning, whether he wants it to or not. The bell rings somewhere in the tower above. Its sound steady and familiar. It carries with it no surprise, only the quiet insistence that time will move forward, with or without consent. He rises, letting his legs dangle for a moment before planting his feet on the cold stone floor. The chill of the castle always greets him first, settling over his shoulders, creeping down his spine. It is a familiar companion, like the ache in his knees or the stiffness in his fingers. He dresses quietly, the thick wool scratching at his arms and shoulders, and he moves without haste, because in this place, haste is unnecessary. It is reserved for moments that almost never come. Breakfast is delivered as usual. Bread, slightly dry, possibly warmed by yesterday's fire. Occasionally, a thin slice of cheese or a smear of something meant to pass, as preserves accompanies it. The guard eats slowly, letting each bite pass like a meditation, observing the mundane miracle that sustenance is, even if it is repetitive. Around him, his fellow guards move with similar deliberation, each man wrapped in the same rhythm that has governed their lives for years. No one speaks much. Words are reserved for necessity, and necessity rarely arises before mid-morning. By mid-morning, the guard is stationed near a less prominent gate, one that sees traffic mostly from messengers, minor visitors, and delivery carts. From this vantage point, he observes the world outside the castle walls. The fields stretch out in their predictable geometry, farmers moving in repetitive patterns, oxen plodding along paths beaten into the soil over generations. A thin haze rises from the horizon, giving the distant trees and hills a muted, dreamlike quality. The guard watches without judgment, taking the small details. A bird's flight, the sway of a branch, the peculiar way a cloud seems to hang above the distant hills longer than it should. Visitors arrive at irregular intervals. A messenger hurries along the path, letter sealed with wax, expression grave enough to suggest the end of the world. The guard watches him pause, present credentials, and eventually be allowed through. Nothing is ruined. Nothing is improved. The guard notes the fleeting importance of the moment and lets it pass, his expression neutral, body still. Inside, the castle continues its quiet chaos. Courtiers and servants move in a measured rhythm, each fulfilling duties that seem simultaneously urgent and trivial. The royal children are visible at times, fleeting glimpses as they are guided from one chamber to another by tutors and nurses. One coughs intermittently. Another stares at a tapestry for a period long enough to suggest deep contemplation, or perhaps disinterest. Their health is always a matter of concern. The family's delicate bloodline demands it, and yet they persist, fragile and stubborn, moving through life in layers of cloth and expectation. The ruler himself appears briefly in the courtyard, swaddled in robes that suggest dignity, though his movements are slow, deliberate, and occasionally unsteady. He gestures at something unseen to the guard, nods to those around him, and retreats to the inner chambers. The guard watches, noting the subtle fatigue in his posture, the way his hands tremble ever so slightly. It is the same fatigue he has observed in previous rulers. A pattern repeats itself quietly over centuries. The morning stretches on, and time takes on a peculiar texture. The light shifts subtly across stone walls, highlighting cracks and imperfections that no one has noticed for years. The guard shifts his weight, though minimally, aware that overexertion is unnecessary. The repetition of standing, watching, and observing the smallest movements has become almost meditative. It is a rhythm without excitement, without thrill, and yet it has a kind of quiet dignity. By midday, The guard is briefly relieved for lunch. Bread again, of course, and perhaps a thin stew or a small piece of meat if fortune allows. He eats slowly, listening to murmurs from nearby guards about the usual trivialities. Whose boots are falling apart fastest, whose cloak smells faintly of smoke, whose turn it is to fetch water. Conversation is low energy, understated. Nothing reaches urgency. Nothing reaches passion. It is comforting in its way. The afternoon brings a new assignment. Patrol along the walls overlooking the courtyard. The sun is high, though filtered to the gray haze of mid-season light. The courtyard is a study in motion without purpose. Servants bustle about, moving material from one corner to another, seemingly without direction. Nobles wander occasionally, discussing things a guard cannot hear clearly, gestures flitting as if painting invisible arguments in the air. The courtyard is alive in the way a machine is alive, endlessly moving, endlessly repeating, yet strangely empty of consequence. From his position, the guard observes the architecture itself. Towers rise steadily, each stone perfectly aligned with the next, though centuries of maintenance have left subtle imperfections. He notices a window with cracked glass, a gargoyle whose expression is beginning to wear away, a vine that has crept up the wall despite every attempt to control it. Details like these accumulate in his awareness, small markers of time passing slowly, imperceptibly. A small commotion occurs when a visiting noble approaches the courtyard. Not alarming, just an arrival with the promise of minor importance. He is greeted, escorted, and guided to a waiting chamber. The guard notes his movement, filing the observation away without comment. The noble's face is pale, a bit tense, as if aware that every expression might be analyzed. The guard watches, silent, unassuming, and fully unimportant in the grand scheme of things. As afternoon slips toward evening, the air cools. Shadows stretch lazily across the walls. The courtyard empties slowly. Servants returning inside, nobles retiring to their private chambers. The guard continues his patrol, pacing slowly, rhythmically, absorbing the gentle decay and subtle persistence of the day. He notices the faint sounds of distant arguments, the clinking of tools being put away, the occasional call from a chamber far off. Life continues, quietly, as it always has. Eventually, his shift ends. The handover to the next guard is brief, almost perfunctory. A nod, a glance, a slight adjustment of cap. Then he walks back to the castle corridors, familiar and unchanging. He passes the armory, the training yard, the quiet hallways that lead to living quarters. Dinner waits, bread warm, occasionally accompanied by something savory. He eats slowly, reflecting on nothing, thinking just enough to pass the time pleasantly. Night settles fully over the castle. Torches flicker along the walls, casting long, wavering shadows. The air is cooler now, carrying the faint scent with smoke and distant hearths. The guard lies down on his bed, muscles aching predictably, mind adrift. He listens to the soft echo of the castle breathing around him. Footsteps faint in the corridors, doors opening and closing somewhere in the distance. The faint murmur of voices in rooms he will never enter. Sleep comes gradually, uneven, persistent, carrying him away from the repetitive but strangely comforting reality of standing, observing, existing without expectation. Another day has passed. Another quiet, slow contribution to the long, indifferent timeline of this place. The stone will remain. The family will endure. The guard will continue to stand, watch, and do nothing that feels consequential. And as we drift onward together, let me leave you with this gentle question. If you were one of these guards, standing quietly while history swirled around you, would you feel invisible or free in a way that the rest of the castle could never understand? If you're still awake enough to think, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. Welcome back, and thank you for staying. The castle is breathing softly tonight, carrying its usual mix of stone, smoke, and faint echoes of conversations long ended. Our guard wakes slowly, with that peculiar awareness of having been here before countless times, and knowing you'll be here again tomorrow and the day after that, without fanfare or recognition. The bell tolls somewhere above, steady, deliberate, an impartial reminder that the day has arrived whether he is ready or not. He sits on the edge of the narrow bed for a moment, letting his body negotiate the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Around him, other guards stir in their own slow, measured way. There is no urgency here. There has never been urgency here. Clothes are pulled on carefully, boots tightened just enough, cap adjusted. Every motion is practiced, performed with quiet precision. This is not boredom. This is survival through repetition. Breakfast appears, as predictable as a sunrise. Bread, slightly dry, warm enough to make it comforting. Occasionally, a small portion of cheese or thinly sliced meat accompanies it. The guard chews slowly, thoughtfully, letting the monotony of flavor match the rhythm of his thoughts. He notices the fellow guards, each moving through the same motions. Faces impassive, eyes focused on nothing in particular. Conversation is muted, polite, unhurried. This is their shared ritual. By mid-morning, the guard is stationed at the courtyard gate, a vantage point that offers both the illusion of importance and the reality of watching nothing happen. Outside, the fields are quiet. Farmers move predictably. Oxen plod with perfect indifference, and dust rises in faint motes, suspended lazily in the soft morning light. The guard observes all of it without judgment, cataloging movements, gestures, and pauses. Time stretches here differently. Thicker, slower, almost tangible. Visitors arrive intermittently. A courier rushes down the road, papers sealed with wax. He stops at the gate, credentials checked, body tense. He is admitted, and his urgency dissipates in the halls of the castle. The guard files the moment away with practiced neutrality. Importance is measured here by who notices, and the guard has long stopped counting himself among the witnesses whose opinions matter. Inside, the royal family engages in its quiet, perpetual dance. The ruler is moving to the courtyard, wrapped in layers of heavy robes, gesturing at matters the guard cannot fully observe. His hand shakes slightly, not enough to alarm anyone, and his expression is a mixture of fatigue and mild exasperation. The royal children wander behind him, fragile, pale, moving with deliberate caution. One coughs. Another glares at a passing servant, though his attention is fleeting. Their lives are carefully orchestrated, but they are not entirely under control. No one ever is. The morning drifts onward. Guards shuffle. Servants carry trays and messages. Courtiers murmur. The occasional footfall echoes from distant corridors. The guard shifts subtly, aware of aches in shoulders and knees. Every step is measured, every breath controlled. Standing still for hours teaches subtlety in the art of movement. He observes cracks in the walls he has memorized, worn patterns in the stone floors, marks left by footsteps of those long gone. Time leaves traces even when nothing else changes. By midday, the courtyard becomes a bit livelier. A minor noble passes through, eyes sharp, expression mildly tense. His movement is precise, calculated, rehearsed. He is escorted by 2 attendants, each performing the choreography of service without a hint of enthusiasm. They disappear into the castle's inner corridors. The guard watches their departure, without noticing the emptiness it leaves. Presence is measured, after all, in the act of observation rather than participation. Lunch arrives, predictable and functional. Bread, possibly cheese, or thin soup. The guard eats slowly, savoring warmth over flavor, routine over novelty. The other guards eat nearby in companionable silence. Conversation is minimal, occasionally touching on trivial matters. Whose cloak needs repair, whose boots smell faintly of smoke, who manage to survive the night without falling asleep at their post. The weight of observation rests on all of them, a shared burden disguised as habit. Afternoon brings reassignment. The guard walks a familiar path to the parapets, the walls rising steadily beneath him, towers stretching upward as if to reassure the heavens that they endure. From this vantage, he observes the inner courtyard, the gardens, the fading banners. Servants trim hedges with slow precision, carry water fountains that drip politely, and sweep paths that will be dirty again tomorrow. Nobles stroll past occasionally, hands clasped behind backs, faces careful, controlled, faintly anxious. The world moves in cycles, and yet it somehow seems urgent to those participating in it. The guard stands still, observing not the motion itself, but the quality of emotion, the awkwardness of nobles attempting grace, the precision of servants feigning swiftness. The slight tremor of banners in the afternoon breeze. Everything is predictable, yet everyone behaves as if novelty exists. The quiet absurdity of it all is comforting. There's a rhythm to the repetition, a kind of beauty in consistency. Small incidents punctuate the afternoon. A bird lands briefly on the wall, inspecting the guard as though considering him for a perch. A messenger arrives, frantic in expression, but ultimately delivering a letter of negligible consequence. Two squires bump into each other, spilling a pouch of coins, and shuffle away muttering apologies. The guard observes everything without judgment, cataloging minutiae as if they are precious artifacts. They are, in their own way. As evening approaches, the castle takes on a softer, more forgiving light. Shadows stretch across the courtyard, drawing gentle lines along stone walls. The air cools slightly. Servants return indoors, closing doors, stowing tools. Nobles retreat to chambers where they will convene privately, discussing matters that rarely require resolution. The guard continues a patrol, slow and deliberate, absorbing the quiet, letting the world pass around him while remaining stationary in essence. Toward dusk, a minor disturbance occurs. Voices raise briefly, the soft clatter of a dropped object, a hurried step across stone. It turns out to be a disagreement over seating arrangements in a small meeting. No one is harmed. No one is enlightened. The guard files this incident mentally, as he does all incidents, cataloging without judgment, noting without comment. History will remember the quarrel briefly, then forget it entirely. He remains steady, witness to inconsequence. His shift ends eventually, as it always does. The handover to the next guard is quiet, almost imperceptible. A nod, a subtle gesture, a brief exchange of glances. Then he walks back through familiar corridors, boots echoing softly, passages dimly lit by torchlight. He passes the armory, the training yard chambers, and halls he has memorized over countless days. Nothing changes. Yet everything shifts imperceptibly with the passage of time. Dinner arrives. Bread once again, possibly a thin stew, if fortune allows. He eats slowly, carefully, mind wandering in the absence of urgency. Someone mentions the ruler's ongoing fatigue. Someone else notes the minor illnesses among the children. Speculation circulates quietly. No conclusions are drawn. This is the rhythm of castle life. Observation, concern, inaction, continuation. Night settles over the castle like a slow tide. Torches flicker in corridors. The faint murmur of voices echoes from chambers. The wind whispers through cracks and arrow slits. The guard lies down on his narrow bed, body aching the familiar way, mind drifting between memory and observation. Sleep comes slowly, as it always does, carry him away from the repetitive yet oddly comforting reality of standing, watching, and being invisible yet present. Another day is recorded only in memory, absorbed into the slow, indifferent passage of castle life. The stone walls remain. The banners fade. The rulers age. The heirs persist, fragile and careful. And the guards, quiet and observant, endure through it all. They are the subtle constants, the unnoticed pillars of routine, the witnesses to both history and triviality, equally indifferent to either. As we drift onward together, I leave you with this question. If you spent your life standing silently, observing moments that matter deeply to others but rarely touch you, would you feel the burden of being forgotten or the gentle freedom of being unimportant? If you're still awake, tell me your thoughts in the comments. Welcome back. The castle rests quietly as dawn approaches, but our guard wakes again, aware that the cycle of another day has begun. The bell tolls somewhere above, gentle but unwavering, announcing time's inexorable march. He sits for a moment, allow his body to catch up with the reality of wakefulness. There is no rush, because there is never a rush here. The day unfolds at its own pace, and no one can change that, even if they tried. He dresses carefully, as he always does. Boots laced just so, wool garments snug but not restrictive, cap adjusted at the precise angle that is proven comfortable over countless repetitions. His movements are almost ritualistic, a quiet choreography that has become second nature. Around him, the other guards move with the same deliberation, each absorbed in the shared rhythm of routine. Conversation is minimal, a few murmured greetings and nods. Words are heavy, after all, and best saved for when necessary. Breakfast arrives, bread dry and familiar, occasionally softened by a smear of butter or cheese. He eats slowly, savoring the warmth rather than the taste. The act of eating has become more than sustenance. It is a brief anchor in a day otherwise defined by waiting and observing. The fellow guards move through the same motions silently, each lost in private thoughts that intersect occasionally in shared glances or faint sighs. By mid-morning, the guard is stationed at the tower entrance overlooking the courtyard. The vantage offers a clear view of daily routines. Servants moving deliberately, nobles striding in carefully measured steps, children wandering briefly under the watchful eyes of tutors and nurses. From this height, the courtyard feels like a stage, with every movement rehearsed, yet somehow chaotic in its repetition. The guard observes without commentary, cataloging details. The slight limp of the stable boy, the careful placement of potted plants, the way shadows stretch across the stone in angles that shift imperceptibly with time. Visitors pass through occasionally. A messenger arrives, breathless, letter in hand, conveying urgency that seems excessive for the actual contents. He pauses, presents his credentials, and is allowed entry. The guard watches the ritual unfold with detached focus, aware that importance here is often a matter of perception. A noble woman arrives later, escorted by a pair of attendants, her expression measured, her posture meticulous. She moves with the practiced elegance expected of someone whose life is observed constantly, even if the observers rarely matter. The ruler himself appears in the courtyard briefly, walking with deliberate slowness. His robes ripple faintly in the breeze, hands trembling slightly as he gestures to matters that the guard cannot fully understand. He speaks to attendants who nod with polite attention, then retreats to inner chambers. The children, fragile and pale, follow their scheduled activities, tutored carefully in literature, music, and manners. One coughs. Another glares at the courtyard wall. Their lives are governed by careful routines and delicate expectations. Time stretches in this space. The guard observes the subtle changes, the shifting of light across the stone, the flutter of banners, the faint alteration in the wind sent as it passes through battlements. Every detail is noted, catalogued silently. He shifts weight occasionally, a subtle movement designed to relieve aches without drawing attention. Standing still for hours teaches awareness of minutiae, appreciation for minor variations, and patience for what never changes. Midday brings lunch, predictable and functional. Bread, perhaps accompanied by a thin stew, offers warmth and routine. The guard eats slowly, listening to the quiet murmur of fellow guards. Conversation touches lightly on minor inconveniences. The smell of smoke in the kitchens, the awkwardness of new recruits, the peculiar behavior of a particular horse. Nothing is urgent, yet all is observed. These small notes are accumulated silently, forming a mental map of the castle's persistent hum. Afternoon arrives, and the guard is reassigned to the walls overlooking the outer grounds. From this perspective, he sees the broader rhythms of life beyond the castle. Farmers tending fields in slow, methodical patterns. Children playing at a safe distance, occasionally running after a ball or stick. Carriages moving lazily along dirt roads. Couriers passing with messages of varying importance. Everything moved predictably, yet is treated as if novelty exists. The guard notes the absurdity without judgment, finding quiet satisfaction in observing the balance between motion and stillness. Small events punctuate the monotony. A bird lands briefly on the parapet, inspecting him as if judging his suitability for a perch. Two squires clash briefly, dropping a pouch of coins, muttering apologies as they gather them up. A messenger arrives with a minor request for audience, only to be told it can wait. The guard absorbs each incident, noting timing, emotion, and the subtle cues of human behavior. He files everything silently, aware that it may not matter today, tomorrow, or ever. The royal family continues its routines largely unseen. The ruler retreats indoors, leaving orders in careful written notes. Children are guided through lessons, sometimes accompanied by tutors, sometimes left to wander the halls in controlled freedom. Illness is an ongoing concern, though carefully managed. The guard hears the faint coughs and whispers, but does not intervene. Intervention is not his task. Observation is his gift, his curse, and his method of participating in the world without altering it. Evening approaches. Shadows stretch across the castle walls, long and deliberate. The light softens, painting the stone in muted tones. Servants return indoors, closing doors, stowing tools, and tidying spaces that will be disheveled again tomorrow. Nobles retreat to their private chambers, discussing matters that often resolve themselves, or do not, without anyone's interference. The courtyard empties gradually, leaving a quiet expanse of stone, bathed in the fading light. The guard walks slowly along his patrol path, observing patterns rather than events. The repetition of movement is comforting. The predictability of shadows and light, sound and silence, human behavior and indifference forms a rhythm he can follow without strain. It is almost meditative, almost sacred in its consistency. He notices minor details. The way moss grows in corners untouched by sun, the subtle warping of a wooden door, the faint creak of a stair tread under its own weight. These things persist when all else fluctuates. Dinner arrives. Bread again, accompanied by a small portion of something warm, filling, and easily digestible. The guard eats, reflecting briefly on the absurdity and persistence of his life. Conversation around him is subdued, touching lightly on the usual minor disturbances. A mismanaged delivery, an awkward interaction with a visitor, a minor illness. None of it demands action. None of it truly matters. He listens, nods silently, and continues eating. Night falls fully and the castle grows still. Torches flicker softly along walls, their light dancing across familiar surfaces. The wind whispers faintly through narrow openings. Doors creak and close somewhere distant, voices fade, and the castle settles into its slow, persistent rhythm. The guard lies down on his bed, muscles heavy with fatigue and familiarity. He stares at the ceiling, tracing cracks and imperfections he knows by heart. Sleep comes gradually, like a gentle tide, carrying him into another night. Unremarkable yet essential. Another day has passed. Another quiet, almost invisible contribution to the rhythm of the castle. The rulers age, children grow or fail to, and the guards continue to observe, unnoticed, unremarked, yet essential in their presence. Their lives are defined not by events, but by the steady, unchanging weight of watchfulness. Their significance lies in persistence rather than action. As we drift onward, I'll leave you with this thought. If you spent your life quietly observing, never influencing, always present, would you feel powerless, or would you find solace in being a quiet foundation beneath the lives of others? If you're still awake, share your reflections in the comments. Welcome back, and thank you for remaining here in the gentle company of this castle. Another day has passed, or perhaps not yet, but the walls themselves do not hurry, and our guard rises slowly, aware that time will continue with or without him. The bell rings in the distant tower, steady and impartial. It calls to the waking, a soft insistence that the world moves forward one measured toll at a time. He sits on the edge of his narrow bed, legs dangling over the stone floor, and pauses to breathe. This pause is unremarkable, yet necessary. The other guard stirs similarly, waking into familiar rhythm of the castle. Clothes are donned carefully, boots fastened just so, cap straightened. Movements are deliberate and measured, each action a rehearsal perfected over countless repetitions. Conversation is minimal. Words are heavy here, and best saved for moments that seldom arrive. Breakfast is served, bread warm, with the occasional thin smear of cheese or meat. The guard eats slowly, savoring warmth and routine over flavor. Around him, fellow guards eat with the same subdued deliberation, murmuring occasionally about minor inconveniences. Who spill water in the hallway, whose boots smell faintly of smoke, or whose turn it is to patrol the distant walls. These small notes, while seemingly trivial, are absorbed into an unspoken shared knowledge, a quiet bond among those tasked with observing what the world around them refuses to notice. By mid-morning, the guard is stationed at the western gate, a position that offers the illusion of importance. From here, he watches the courtyard and beyond. Farmers move in a predictable rhythm. Carts roll slowly along well-trodden paths, and animals follow the same paths as they always have. Everything seems minor and routine, yet the guard knows that even routine is deserving of attention. Each movement, no matter how trivial, has its place in the slow tapestry of the day. Visitors pass occasionally. A messenger arrives, brisk and tense, delivering a letter of negligible importance, but with urgency that suggests the end of the world. The guard watches, silent and neutral, as the courier presents her credentials and is allowed passage. Later, a minor noblewoman approaches, attended by 2 courtiers. Her gestures are precise, her expressions calculated. She moves through the courtyard as if performing for an audience, unaware that the only one who observes with true constancy is the guard. The ruler appears briefly in the courtyard, draped in robes heavy enough to suggest dignity, even if dignity is occasionally undermined by fatigue. He gestures at matters the guard cannot perceive fully, speaks to attendants who nod politely, and then retreats. The children, fragile and carefully tended, are guided through lessons and movements that leave no room for improvisation. One coughs, another stares for a moment at the floor. Their lives are shaped by expectation, delicacy, and precaution. Time moves strangely here. The guard notices subtle shifts in light across stone floors, the way shadows stretch and shorten imperceptibly, the faint play of dust motes suspended in midair. Every minute, every movement, every detail is catalogued silently. His body aches in familiar ways, shoulders stiff, knees groaning, but he adjusts subtly, aware that overexertion is unnecessary. Repetition, as he has learned, builds endurance more than skill. Midday arrives. Lunch is brought, predictable and practical. Bread, thin stew, perhaps a small piece of meat. He eats slowly, listening to his fellow guards murmuring quietly about minor disturbances. Misplaced equipment, minor illnesses, a squeaky floorboard. Nothing here requires immediate action, yet every observation is absorbed with quiet attention. These seemingly trivial details form a mental map, an invisible record of life as it persists under the watch of stone and mortar. Afternoon duties place the guard along the outer walls, overlooking the training yard. From here, he observes activity that is almost performance art in its repetition. Servants carry water to fountains, sweep paths, and trim hedges. Nobles stroll carefully, hand behind their backs, expressions curated. A small child chases a ball, falls, and gets up again. The guard notices all of it with measured attention. No urgency is needed. The rhythms of life here have their own momentum. Small incidents occur. 2 squires bump into each other, dropping coins that roll across the stone. A bird lands briefly on the battlement, peering curiously at the guard before flying off. A messenger delivers a minor notice, only to be redirected elsewhere. Each event is noted, catalogued, and passed over with quiet neutrality. The absurdity of it all is comforting, a reminder that life continues even when it seems meaningless. The royal family continues their routines largely unnoticed. The ruler retires to chambers, issuing orders and written notes. The children move through lessons, tutored and guided, fragile but persistent. Illness lingers as an ongoing concern, carefully monitored but never catastrophic. The guard hears coughs and whispers but does not intervene. Observation, not interference, is his mandate, and he performs it without judgment. Evening arrives gradually. Shadows deepen, stretching across the courtyard, painting familiar surfaces in soft, muted tones. Servants return indoors, closing doors and stowing tools. Nobles retire to private chambers, discussing matters that may or may not be resolved. The courtyard empties, leaving quiet stone and the soft, persistent presence of the guard. He patrols slowly along familiar paths, observing patterns rather than events. The repetition is comforting. Shadows, light, sound, and silence form a rhythm that guides him. Minor details draw his attention. Moss creeping in corners, a slightly warped door, the faint creak of stairs under their own weight. These small markers of persistence are the foundation of his day, a slow meditation on continuity and endurance. Dinner arrives. Bread, warm, sometimes accompanied by a small portion of stew. The guard eats slowly, reflecting on the gentle absurdity of life here. Conversation touches lightly on minor events. A delivery delayed, a small quarrel, an ongoing illness. Nothing demands immediate attention, yet all is absorbed into quiet fabric of the day. Life continues, moving slowly, deliberately, in ways that seem simultaneously important and trivial. Night falls. Torches flicker along walls, casting long, wavering shadows. Doors creak softly. Voices echo faintly, and the wind whispers through narrow openings. The guard lies down on his narrow bed, body heavy with familiarity and fatigue. Mind drifting between observation and memory. Sleep comes gradually, carrying him away from the quiet absurdities he has witnessed and into the gentle darkness of rest. Another day has passed. Another quiet contribution to the slow, relentless passage of time. The rulers age, children persist, guards continue, and the stone walls endure. Presence here matters not in action, but in continuity. Those who watch, unnoticed and often forgotten, are the anchors of daily life, holding the delicate balance between order and chaos with quiet persistence. As we drift onward, consider this. If you were among those who observe without influence, who endure without recognition, would you find solace in the quiet constancy of your life, or would you crave a disturbance that rarely arrives? Share your thoughts in the comments, if you're still awake enough to reflect. Welcome back to the castle, and thank you for staying with me until the quiet conclusion of our long journey through its stone walls and endless routines. The guard awakens once more, slowly, the soft light of dawn brushing the windows, filtered through the familiar haze of early morning. The bell tolls above, steady, impartial, and indifferent. Another day begins, as it has always begun, and as it will continue to begin, with the gentle persistence of time that does not wait, nor apologize for moving forward. He sits briefly on the edge of his bed, legs dangling over the familiar stone floor, acknowledging the ache in his shoulders and the stiffness in his knees. This awareness is a gentle companion, as predictable as the sun or the tolling bell. Around him, the other guards stir with the same deliberation, their motions careful, practiced, almost ceremonial. Clothing is adjusted, boots laced, caps straightened, and the subtle nods of acknowledgement exchanged among them speak volumes, though nothing is said aloud. Breakfast is brought, unchanging in composition but comforting in its predictability. Bread, slightly dry but warm, sometimes with a hint of cheese or thinly sliced meat. The guard eats slowly, savoring routine more than flavor. Around him, the quiet murmurs of his colleagues touch briefly on minor inconveniences. A squeaky door hinge, a misplaced bundle of letters, a slightly cracked window pane. Conversation remains minimal, purposeful only in its gentle acknowledgement that life continues, minute by minute. By mid-morning, the guard is stationed near the eastern gate, the vantage providing a clear view of the courtyard and beyond. From here, he observes life in its quiet, methodical patterns. Farmers plodding along established paths, animals moving predictably, carts rolling slowly across well-worn roads. Everything seems minor, trivial, yet worthy of attention. The guard notices the minute differences that occur without warning. A bird lingering slightly longer on a fence post, the subtle tilt of a wagon wheel, the faint ripple of wind across the grass. In this space, even small changes carry a weight of significance. Visitors pass through sporadically. A messenger arrives, breathless and earnest, delivering a letter of negligible importance but with exaggerated urgency. The guard observes silently, as he always does, the ritual of scrutiny, verification, and admittance. Later, a nobleman, tall and carefully attired, approaches with attendants, movements precise, posture deliberate. He navigates the courtyard as if performing for an audience, yet the only truly constant observer is the guard. He notes the subtleties of expression, the stiffness of movement, the quiet anxiety masked behind decorum. The ruler makes a brief appearance, wrapped in heavy robes that ripple gently in the morning breeze. His hands tremble slightly as he gestures to attendants, issuing directions that are heard and promptly filed. The children, pale and fragile, follow a tightly orchestrated schedule of lessons and guided activity. One coughs. Another glances briefly at the stone floor, expression carefully measured. Their lives are the careful balance of expectation and delicacy, nurtured and contained by adults who are equally constrained by tradition and caution. Time moves in curious ways within the castle. Shadows lengthen imperceptibly across stone floors. Light shifts subtly through narrow windows, and dust motes drift lazily in beams of sunlight. The guard's awareness of these nuances sharpens as hours pass. He shifts weight occasionally, subtle movements designed to alleviate stiffness without drawing attention. Standing still for hours teaches patience, mindfulness, and the quiet art of seeing without needing to act. By midday, lunch is delivered, bread, sometimes accompanied by a thin stew or small portion of meat. He eats slowly, absorbing warmth and routine. Fellow guards discuss minor annoyances, the clumsiness of new recruits, the odor of smoke in a corner of the hall, the minor frictions of daily castle life. These observations, trivial on the surface, form a collective awareness, a shared map of the slow hum of existence. Afternoon duties take the guard to the parapets, overlooking both courtyard and surrounding fields. From here, he observes the rhythms of life beyond the castle walls. Farmers tending fields in repetitive, comforting cycles, children playing under distant supervision, travelers moving along winding paths. Everything unfolds predictably, yet human behavior is rarely entirely predictable. He notices the faint tilt of a roof, the subtle unevenness of the terrain, the slight stagger of a horse trotting. The details are cataloged, small stories absorbed without commentary. Minor incidents punctuate the afternoon, providing gentle texture rather than excitement. Two squires stumble, dropping coins, and quietly scuffle to retrieve them. A bird lands briefly on the parapet, studying the guard before flying off. A messenger delivers a note of minor import, only to be redirected elsewhere. Each event is observed carefully, followed silently, and then fades into the slow stream of time that carries everything forward. The royal family continues in parallel routines, largely unseen. The ruler retires to chambers, issuing written directives. The children are guided through lessons, music, and etiquette, while their fragile health is monitored carefully. Coughs, whispers, and minor injuries pass unnoticed by most, though the guard notes them quietly. Intervention is not his duty. Observation alone suffices. Presence here is subtle, almost invisible, yet essential. As evening falls, shadows deepen, stretching across the courtyard and stone walls. Torches are lit, casting long, wavering shadows that make the familiar landscape appear slightly different, though nothing truly changes. Servants return indoors, closing doors, stowing tools, and tidying spaces that will be disheveled again tomorrow. Nobles retreat to private chambers, their hushed conversations fading into the walls. The courtyard empties, leaving stone quiet except for the distant echo of the guard's boots as he patrols slowly along the familiar paths. Dinner is brought, bread, warm, accompanied by a small portion of stew or broth. The guard eats slowly, reflecting on the rhythm of his life. Conversation around him touches lightly on minor disturbances, delayed deliveries, minor quarrels, ongoing illnesses. Nothing requires immediate action, yet all contributes to the quiet fabric of existence within the castle. Life continues, methodical and persistent, like the stones themselves. Night deepens, the castle settling into silence. Torches flicker gently along walls, casting shadows that shift with the wind. Doors creak softly, voices fade, and the air grows cooler. The guard lies on his narrow bed, body heavy with the familiarity of fatigue, mind drifting between observation and memory. Sleep arrives slowly, carrying him into darkness, as gentle and persistent as the days themselves. And now, as we close this long journey together, we reflect on the slow, enduring rhythm of the castle, the quiet persistence of guards, the fragile health and careful lives of the royal family, the gentle absurdities of repetitive routines, and the subtle passage of time that touches all, yet changes almost nothing. Before we part, a few gentle reminders. If you found comfort in this slow exploration of history and routine, consider liking this video. Perhaps even subscribe and follow along with more calming historical journeys. Share it with someone who might enjoy the quiet absurdity of life in stone, the slow persistence of human habits, and the gentle irony of observing without influence. And as you drift toward sleep, consider this final thought. If you were one of these guards, standing quietly while the world continued around you, would you find freedom in invisibility, solace in routine, or peculiar satisfaction in witnessing without interference? Reflect on it gently. And if you're still awake, I would love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for staying with me through these long, soft hours of castle life, observation, and quiet absurdity. May your night be calm, your dreams slow moving, and your morning gentle.